Righto, let's jump in straight away. I'm going to go to Melbourne. Now, I've got this text that's come in from a Melbourne supporter an hour ago, and I just held on to it because I thought it'd be a great way to start. The question was, who is going to kick Melbourne's goals without Fritsch? Forward line issues, can't score over 80. Let's just crap on about Grundy. Just terrible analysis. When all the media sheep wrote off the Demons, be great to get some people in the media who actually know how to analyse the game. So, dear Demons supporters, those 4 questions were legitimate, those 4 questions were real, and those 4 questions have largely been answered in the last 3 weeks. What Melbourne have been able to do has been fantastic. We've seen, and I'll get to Carlton, and Carlton fans don't fret too long. You won't have to wait. What Melbourne have done the last 3 weeks has been huge, and they've made some courageous decisions around their team. They've realised that the direction they were heading needed to change. And they are now one of the form teams in competition based off the last 3 weeks. They've changed things significantly, and their coach, Simon Goodwin's pretty happy. But what I would suggest and what I want to focus on is their heart and soul players, Max Gawn and Jack Viney, in amongst the plethora of players that they have that perform really well. But those 2 in particular just keep finding a way when the game's on the line. Melbourne were getting flogged by Brisbane on the G. Charlie Cameron kicked a goal to put Brisbane 28 points up at the 29-minute mark of the third quarter. Enter Max Gawn. And Petrarca were fighting them through in the third quarter, but Max Gawn's last quarter played 100%, 7 disposals, 6 contested, 2 contested marks, couple of tackles, couple of clearances, and just willed his side to victory. Jack Viney ripped the ball out of Oscar McInerney's hands for a forward 50 goal at that time. They won that game by a point, and it was a sliding doors moment for them because they've done it in the last 2 weeks as well. Adelaide kicked 4 goals in a row at the beginning of the last quarter. At the 8-minute mark, the scores were level, and Todd Viney. I keep going with Todd. They do play very similarly, but Jack Viney just made the game his own. 10 disposals, 6 contested possessions, 4 clearances. All 4 of those clearances were centre bounce clearances, and when he gets going through the middle of the field, it happens. Melbourne win that game against Adelaide. And then this weekend, we see Max Gawn just take over. 13 disposals, this is the last quarter, 13 disposals, 9 contested, 7 clearances in a quarter. He just started taking the ball out of the ruck. Now, Soldo had been pretty good throughout the match. Bolter was put in there in some shape or form to add a bit of freshness to the contest, but Max Gawn was able to get it done. These 2 guys, in and amongst everything else that Melbourne have done, the courage to let Grundy go because they needed to change their forward setup. Max Gawn steps up and says, I can do this solo, and he's done it extremely well. Fritsch gets injured, bit of good fortune for Jake Melksham, but he comes in and has an impact.
Don't underestimate him.
No, he's been huge.
Not only for the scoreboard impact, but for what he brings to this side. So you've mentioned Gawn and Viney, and you could chuck in Petrarca. Don't underestimate what this guy has done. There's been, I think, a level of disrespect to Melbourne all year. They're the second seed. Melbourne are the second seed right now, and they're the biggest threat and biggest challenger to Collingwood. Do you agree with that?
I think that with the football that they are displaying, they're playing. Really, they're still getting their balance right. They've given the 3 scores they've given up in the last 3 weeks are in the top 5 scores that they've given up all year, but you have to give to get. So defensively, they're a little bit more exposed now than they were prior to the last 3 weeks, but they've also just kicked 130, 97, and 105 in the last 3 weeks.
And that's what you asked for 3 weeks ago.
Well, that's exactly what but it's not any. So I get the comment about the media analysis, but what has happened is that internally they have seen, and this doesn't happen with a click of a fingers, over the 4 or 5 weeks leading into that Brisbane game, there was clearly evidence that what was put in place was not working. And then you've got now you have Brodie Grundy, who's probably the highest paid backup player on any list at the moment, and now that's a great luxury for Melbourne to have at the back end of the year because they can go to that if need be, and there will be injuries and there will be calls on depth for every team. But Max Gawn has stepped up and become everything that we know that he could be, and he's done it because he's been asked to and he's been used to it. But what it's done is it means that their forward line has been more malleable. They've had more smalls. Petty now goes forward and shows you something. No Brown, no Grundy, no second ruck there as such. You've got a different mix, and it's been able. And when Fritsch comes, and he will come back into that mix. I don't know exactly where, but when he comes back into that mix, it adds another question again.
And have done it without Oliver. So you absolutely beat up on Richmond's midfield, who have invested so heavily in the midfield, given away all their draft picks, given 2 7-year contracts, and they smacked them without Clayton Oliver, and that last quarter was extraordinary. Just on Grundy, you got to be careful with Gawn. So it's all the talk is, well, Grundy won't play again. I'd be hesitant to say that because Gawn's playing time, I think, is now an issue for them. They can't burn this guy. He's 32 years of age. You can't run him into the ground. 100% game time in the last quarter again on the weekend.
That's 3 weeks in a row that he's played
3 weeks
100%.
in a row. You cannot burn this guy. So they play North this week. I would actually think about playing Brodie Grundy to give Max Gawn an in-game rest. You can't cook this guy ahead of the finals. He's that important to them.
You're a month away. I get what you're saying, but you're a month away from a pre-finals bye.
You can't cook him, Bucks. You can't.
You're a month away from a pre-finals bye. He will be the one that will decide. He's. I think number one ruckman. You'll know.
Competitor.
You'll
know.
Number
playing.
one ruckman are one of the few players on your list that I actually reckon grow with more work. They're not asked to do high speed bursts to space. It's a grind position.
A lot of collisions.
It is a lot of collisions, but I think that is a conditioning element of what they do. I think the best ruckman, they play better with more game time. They want to be the number one guy. And when Max Gawn has got to last quarters, he wants he's played 100%. He's played 5.
They're playing North though. I understand that. If he plays 100% game time in the last quarter this week, it's ridiculous.
No,
ridiculous. And who's going to go in there to help him if Grundy's not there?
Well, then have a look at playing Brodie Grundy as your sub and play Max Gawn for a half, and then 100%. Play Grundy for a half, and keep Grundy ticking along. But that might be something that's something that the coaching group can go to. But they still have top 2 in their sights. They still want to get to that. And you're right about North. It is an opportunity there to have a look at, but you've still got to win the game.
What's point 2?
Point 2 is Carlton. These two sides, Melbourne and Carlton, have shown amazing resilience, and the shifts in what they've been able to do in season. Just reflect back. I don't know. You go back 7 weeks, 9 weeks, 11 weeks, 13 weeks. Carlton were in the doldrums. They couldn't score. They couldn't move the footy. Yeah. Vossi was going to get sacked. Yeah, they draw their first game, then win the next 3. Out of their next 9 games, they lose 8, and they only beat the West Coast Eagles. And then in the last 6 rounds, since playing Gold Coast, in the last 6 rounds, their winning margins, the average winning margin's 9 goals. They're now keeping sides to nothing, and they're scoring heavily. They're the number one defensive side in the comp number one offensive side in the comp in the last 6 weeks, and they've maintained a top 4 defensive ranking. They have their balance right. Their game is in great order, and this man, Michael Voss, deserves a lot of credit for that. That 9-week period where they really struggled. If you get out of that, it builds a resilience and a belief in the group deeper, and more sustainable than potentially your good times are going to be. So Carlton now are a massive danger for whoever they face. So the next 4 weeks, the draw itself is fascinating, but the next 4 weeks are going to be a beauty to watch. I mean, next week Carlton play St Kilda. And St Kilda are now established. They're a game and a half in the 8, but no one feels like the second half of the year that they deserve to be there. But they've still got bona fides. So but in 2 weeks' time, Carlton play Melbourne. So that potentially the 2 form teams in the competition come up against one another. So Blues fans would be loving it. Energy, belief, contest, not relying on 1 or 2. Mackay's out. Chera goes out after a brilliant first half. No Walsh. Newman picks up 27 touches. Akers picks up 23. No other Carlton player has more than 20. And every Carlton player, bar Pitney and De Koning, have over 10 touches. The spread is as even as you get. It's across the board. It's in contest. They're defending hard. And now they're running hard forward to attack and to score.
I told you the lid was off 4 weeks ago, Blues fans. You just said put the lid back on. Is the lid now off? 1300 736 736. Would love to hear your thoughts on that. Are you dreaming of finals? It has been a long time. What's point 3?
Going individually to Toby Greene, he's a little bit off Broadway. I mean, everyone knows I think he is, but GWS are as well. Yeah. 7 wins in a row. They've snuck into the top 8. And they've gone about it with a minimum of fuss. But Toby Greene, 5 goals too. He's had 49 goals for the year. He's the best big moment player in the competition. And when he kicked his 5th on the weekend, to be able to steal that win against the Bulldogs, I'm sure the Giants fans were loving it. The thing I love about him, he's never beaten. He's a massive competitor. He has a physical streak in him that you don't often see in some forwards. Like he's got a real aggression to him. He wins the ball in the air. He wins it on the ground. He's one of the few players who gets when forwards get tagged all day, every day. But the focus on him, defenders will largely play off and team defend. But the focus on him is intent. Like if you don't have one guy that's assigned to you, you've got 2.
Can I ask you a question? How many Brownlow medal votes do you think he got last year, Toby Greene?
How many did he get?
3. If he doesn't get in the 20s this year, something is seriously wrong with the system. That would be my thought on that.
Well, he influences games, but the final point I'll have with the Giants. Once you get your defence, they've got their defence sorted. There's a bit of Team D that they're doing. They give up high inside 50s, but their back 7 are really solid. They can handle a lot of volume coming their way, and they're holding up.
Is that sustainable?
Potentially no, but they've done it for a long period of time now. But so you add Toby Greene, you add Whitfield, you add Cornelio, who's having a sneaky good season, and you add Kelly to that mix. That are outside and above as ball winners and finishers above that team defence. Why can't you?
Yeah.
Why can't you beat anyone that you face? And that's what they're grinding games out. They're getting the best out of their squad at the moment. And really impressed by the way they're going about it.
They can beat anyone. I mean, they've knocked off. They smashed Freo. They've beaten Melbourne. They've beaten Adelaide away from home and come from behind, and they've beaten Western Bulldogs in Ballarat. They can beat anyone.
We've got a month of elimination finals coming out. We've probably had We've had 8-point games for the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yep.
And we've got 8-point games for the next couple. But the last 2 rounds, we're going to see elimination finals. I count 7 of the last 9 of the round 24 games could impact final 4, final 8, because there's so many teams that are involved and would feel just the way Luke Beveridge does about his finals chances with the Bulldogs. It's up to them. It's something that they're in control of, and probably down to Gold Coast on the ladder, who are sitting in 14th. Now, Freo another game back in 15th. But probably down to the Gold Coast, they would feel, even the Gold Coast would feel, we've got winnable games in front of us and our destiny is in our hands. Well, it's interesting that two teams that have got stand-in coaches, caretaker coaches in Richmond and Gold Coast, and potentially Gold Coast at a stretch, could find themselves on the edge of the 8 come the end of the season.
That's why when you're the Western Bulldogs and you go up by 35 points into the third quarter at home and lose, it's an opportunity that you don't get back, and far too often that happens at the Western Bulldogs.
And possession's 9/10. So St Kilda are sitting at 11 wins and have a little bit of percentage on GWS. But the 2 form teams in the comp at the moment, outside of the top 5, so if you outside of the top 4, so Collingwood, Port, Brisbane and Melbourne are clear. Then you've got GWS and Carlton that are sitting in 6th and 7th at the moment. Outside of those teams, the 2 next best formed teams at the moment are Sydney and Richmond. They're in 10th and 11th. So there's still, like, if they continue on their trend in terms of their performances, well, then there's going to be marginal. And that doesn't include Geelong, who are on the cusp. It doesn't include the Bulldogs, who are in there. And it doesn't include St Kilda, who's currently sitting at 5th. This is a season unlike any others. We've got 4 teams with draws. Their percentage is going to matter against each other. there's 2 points here, there's 2 points there, there's percentage, the permutations are all over the place. So possession becomes 9/10. If you're in there, as Luke Beveridge suggested, it's up to you. So
and finally,
fascinating
for you,
this one is clear. Like this is a bit of a volcano that I'm going to come up with here. Like so, this is everyone's going to have their say in the Aliir Jones collision.
Get your hands off the volcano.
No, well, I won't. I'll call it the Oppenheimer then. Like, this could. But my issue is not with Port Adelaide. It's not even with the focus around concussion, because I think that is legitimate and that is real, and it's something that the league need to continue to consider and deal with. Mine is the difference between if you have been a player who has been suspended when a player you have tackled has grazed their left ear on 2 or 3 blades of grass, and you've got a week or you've got 2 weeks, and you watch this event take place and one of those players goes back on the field, you have every right to be absolutely livid with the AFL. If you have a teammate who's been suspended, if you are a club who's had a player that's been suspended, if you are a supporter who has seen a player suspended for a tackle where there has been incidental, in my view, head contact to the ground, and he has been suspended, he is carrying the can for the whole league, and they are not following through with it. Because if head contact and head trauma is important to them, and lawyers are making these decisions about we need to penalise this player so that our threshold is up here above what everyone else in the competition believes it should be, and we're going to go to the court with that, and we're going to say that we hold this at a higher threshold than any other person in the competition, and then you allow that to happen,
so it
doesn't fit.
The AFL should come down hard on Port Adelaide for the stand that they've taken on head knocks and tackling and concussion, and then if they let this slip through with no punishment to Port Adelaide, that's farcical. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm looking forward to speaking with David Zeta at 7:40, because I know there's been shifts in the protocols and somewhat in the thresholds that the AFL are using. I need to know the facts of that. So I want to interrogate Zeitz around what has happened, what are the facts of the matter. But if I'm anyone in the competition and I'm looking at the AFL, I'm saying, how are you handling this? Are you coming down hard on this as hard on this at clubs and the doctors within it? And I'm not suggesting that anything inappropriate took place, but in terms of if your protocols allow this, and you're going to go and suspend players for that, then there's a disconnect in my mind.
So I've clearly spoken to the club. Their line is that Aliir wasn't concussed as far as the doctor concerned. He took a shot to the jaw. He came off. The doctors looked at the vision. They followed protocols. And as far as they're concerned, he wasn't concussed. They're saying he is fine now. The club leaves those decisions to the doctors, and that was the decision. North Melbourne are clearly got their hand well and truly out from the AFL, and what has happened since then is, in my belief, that attitude filters through the playing group where they lose a game against potentially the worst AFL side we have ever seen, and they've lost 17 in a row. So in terms of a crack at a club, my crack is at North Melbourne, and we can just brush past North Melbourne and they'll lose 17 in a row, and that's the case again, and the fans are happy because they've got Alistair Clarkson, they've got a good coaching support mechanism around them and a good footy department. But we can't let this slip through, because North Melbourne's only hope is to go to the AFL with their hand well and truly out again. They're a club that plays for draft picks, not for wins, and it is disgraceful, the attitude, I think, that has filtered through the club in the last, I'm going to say, 5-6 weeks. And you can't tell me that hasn't had an effect on the psychology of the players, where they lose a game against a team that is as bad as Fitzroy or a team that is as bad as GWS when they were full of 18-year-olds in their first year. So to North, how about we start focusing on turning the footy club around with wins and an elite football program and players buying into that and an effort on game day, more so than the sole focus being on how can the AFL help us again with another set of priority picks and some more handouts.
Do you think that Brett Ratton's comments then were probably as neutral as that he could have been? He wasn't campaigning for the pick.
but the club clearly is behind
Yeah,
the signs.
I understand.
The club clearly is, and the commentary around that, and the commentary around, oh, well, what if we get special access to academy players? Oh, what if we get pick 3 for Ben Mackay if he goes? What if we get more priority picks on the back of priority picks last year? That you cannot tell me hasn't filtered through.
I can agree with. I agree with you in some aspects, but every club, every one of the 18 clubs, is finding ways of trying to maximise a competitive advantage and find an edge on their opposition. So that I think that's all North are doing, is trying to work out how they can maximise their advantages.
So don't do
off
that.
The field.
Don't do that publicly. Shut that down straight away and say we do not. We are not interested in handouts from the AFL. I'll leave that to Sonia Hood and keep that well and truly behind closed doors. Do not let that enter.
Well, that's pretty much
public discussion.
That's pretty much how Brett Ratton.
I'll leave that
to Jen. He dropped that in just in the middle, but he did try to say that we'll leave that to other elements of the club now. So he tried to distance himself from in that particular grab, but you're
not strongly enough.
No,
it's harsh on Brett Ratton because it's not his job. But
it's part of the commentary around North. I'll check you. They played West Coast, yes, and West Coast have been terrible on their home deck. So West Coast would have also seen this as an opportunity to win a game of footy. You got premiership players Hearn, Duggan. Hearn, Duggan, Gaff, Sheed, Cripps, Darling,
team West Coast that we've seen since Fitzroy and the Giants.
Kelly, I understand.
Don't sit here and tell me West Coast are a strong team.
No, they're not.
And North in every way should have been a 6-goal better team.
It was a true bottom of the table clash, and it looked like one as well.
Yeah,
and two sides that are not going well and struggling. And we're talking about West Coast. Clubs in the competition feeling like West Coast have tanked through the year and haven't really given their best. How can you when you're less than 50% across 20 rounds of football with some of the quality that they've got on their list? Have we had full exposure to their list at any point? No, we haven't.
Yeah.
So
my focus is on the attitude that has filtered through North Melbourne, and their only hope now is to go well and truly with their hand out to the AFL. How about you look at your responsibility to turn it around, not the AFL of how many picks you can get.
Well, I'm on record. I'm on record in saying that I don't think there should be priority picks handed out. But then again, I was reminded very, very sharply after that is that Dale Thomas and Scott Pendlebury were one of those boys was a priority pick. So that's what happens. But you only back announce this. There was a priority pick given, and it had to be used on Tucker and Logue, or it had to be traded on, and it was used on Tucker and Logue. Now, get those choices right on the players. Now that's might be harsh on those two after 12 months.
Get your other first round draft picks that you've got, and there's tens of them in North Melbourne's side. How about you get them right first? Bucks, let's start on Friday night where the Blues and the lid is off in a big way, knocked off Collingwood by 17 points.
Yeah, I'm still getting the splinters out from a couple of Speaks Volume selections last week, but this one's pretty clear. It's the Blues and the way that they've gone about it. 6 wins in a row. They've just been able to go from strength to strength. They're playing with more verve and dare. They're going forward hard. They're defending really well. Their scores for inside 50s has been through the roof. And I want to isolate Charlie Curnow in this. 25 goals from his 3 games against 2 v the Eagles and 1 v North, winning the Coleman, but in my mind still with a little bit of an asterisk against the better teams this year. Now, he gets more attention than any other forward. But for him to kick 6 goals, he's such a threat in the air and on the ground. It was a heavyweight matchup with Darcy Moore. And very rarely do you see the key intercept defenders like that not necessarily exposed, but even have to be thinking about the opponent that they're on. Usually they just go ball first, ball second, and ball third. Darcy Moore was concerned and needed to defend Charlie Curnow, and only a heavyweight key forward can do that. And there was a couple of one-on-ones at the top of the goal square that were amazing. And I thought, Charlie Curnow was awesome. Carlton have been fantastic in the last 6 weeks. And in the next month, it's going to be great viewing for everyone in the competition. The Cats played Fremantle Dockers down at GMHBA.
Speaks volumes about Geelong and where they are at. They've teased us through parts of the year and you get sucked in. You think, oh, they're back. But they're not back, unfortunately, and there's a host of issues. It starts in the midfield where they just get beaten up in the midfield week after week. They're too thin through there. There isn't enough A-grade talent through the midfield, and that was exposed once again by a good midfield side led by Jackson, who just looks a far better player when he's the number one ruckman. Caleb Sarong did what he has done all year, and Geelong, there was no response. So in the last 6 or 7 weeks, they've only beaten North, Essendon. There are a couple of those wins, and the draw against Sydney was really poor as well. They're not hungry.
The pun. Are they hamstrung now? Are they,
yeah, and that's so. I wonder
terrible.
about there's they've been famous for not training a whole lot and having a very relaxed atmosphere, and that is good when you're winning. But I just wonder when you get to be an older group and you need that conditioning and you need that hardening and you need that sharpening up, has that relaxed atmosphere come back to hurt them? And are they complacent? Are they comfortable on what they did last year? Evidence and the footage that you see, some of their efforts were so poor, and Henry and Kolodjasny, Tom Stewart turned the footy over probably 4 or 5 times. You just haven't seen it. They're not the hungry group that they were last year, and the season is essentially done for the Cats. GWS beat and came from behind to beat the Western Bulldogs in Ballarat.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the winners again, GWS. They kicked 9 of 11 goals from the 10-minute mark of the third quarter right through to with about 5 minutes to go before Bailey Dale snapped that goal, and the Dogs looked like they had a chance to win. But I love GWS's resilience. They to a man, they find a way just to play 4 quarters of football, and I say it often. There's 2 ways to win games of footy. One is to best your opposition, and the other one is just to do your best and not beat yourself. Beating yourself, you lose a lot of games with teams just beating themselves, but the GWS are not going to do that. They're going to play 4 quarters of footy. They're not always going to be on the top of their game, but they're going to hang in and they're going to stay in the contest. And that's what they've done consistently. As I said, Cornelio is probably the one I want to identify. He's been able to sneak through the year without really much focus at all. A couple of years ago, as a captain, really struggled and had a drop off, had a lull. Now he's a little bit off Broadway. He's averaging over 30 touches in the last 8 or 9 games. He's winning contested ball. He's tackling. He's pressuring. He's running with at times, but not giving no credit for it. And I just think that he is a sign of a player who has just dropped into team focus, see if I can make my teammates better. And he looks like he's really enjoying his footy, which is great to see. Gold Coast were just far too strong for Brisbane. And
they were, Bucks, and that's where I'm going to go with speaks volumes. I want to highlight their under-24s and the performance that they produced. So Flanders has put together a really strong month. 22, 23 years of age. I want to look at Noah Anderson, who was extraordinary and was allowed to waltz around doing as he pleased on the weekend. No attention into him. His ball use, he had 20 kicks, and his ball use was exquisite, I thought. Will Power is a star, and we don't talk about Will Power enough. 23, 22 years of age. Lukosius, still only 22 years of age, significant, and Ben King. What a platform that is. And then you've got Humphrey.
What about the Ford 50 goal that Rao kicked?
Yeah, the stoppage goal. It was
unbelievable.
Freakish. And it wasn't his big performance, and I still think there's a lot of areas that Rao can improve, which I've been outspoken on. But what a core group of under 24-year-olds to build this club around for the new coach to walk into and go, okay, we're really well led. Haven't even spoken about Miller's performance on Neil. So got great leaders in him and Witts.
And just quietly, their reserves are on the top of the VFL ladder. Have won 14 of 16 games and have a percentage of 172. So they're pretty strong there also.
So the expectation next year for the new coach, and they've spoken about this when they sacked Stewie Dew, has to be finals with the core group of players who have played a lot of footy now together, but really strong performance and perhaps a teaser for what this group could be capable of in the future. Sydney by 2 points over Essendon on Saturday night.
Yeah, I'm going to go the winners again. And these two sides have had similar seasons in many ways. I mean, Essendon have probably exceeded expectation, and Sydney as the grand finalists have dropped underneath theirs. But when we get to this point, they're quite similar. Like Essendon have won the 9 games, and I think they've been relatively competitive, but their last 3 weeks have been quite disappointing. Sydney 9.5 games. They'd really be lamenting that draw against Geelong. 4 or 5 weeks back now, because that may be significant in the final determinations. But their percentage is 111, and they've been able to build some form in the last 10 weeks. They're one of the few sides outside of the 8 that have won more than they've lost. There's 6.5 wins from their last 10 games. Richmond have got a better than 50-50 win-loss ratio in the last 10 games. So they're coming, and they're coming hard. They play GWS next week. So we're talking about these big games. I mean, so that Battle of the Bridge is going to be huge. The week after, they play Gold Coast. The week after that, they've got the Adelaide Crows over at Adelaide Oval. And then they finish with a game against Melbourne. So
it's a hard month.
So it is a hard month, but they are tracking in the right direction. We're going to chat to Chad Warner later this morning, and he's back after a sustained period out. El Gordon is having the season of a career, let alone he's 3 or 4 years in, and he's so consistent. He uses the ball so well. Beautiful. I think that Buddy loss isn't going to be anything like what people think it is. They've got Logan, they've got Amadi, they've got McLean, they've got players that are playing roles really well, like young player Papley, Wicks, the smaller players that are damaging at ground level. They're more than a sneaky chance to get in there, and they get in there, they could do some damage.
The showdown, I'm going to go with Adelaide. I'm going to go with Port Adelaide, because I think 3 weeks ago I told you, Bucks, that Port Adelaide would only win one out of their next 4.
Yeah, what is that one?
Lost 3, so they need to beat Geelong this week to prove me accurate. But I said they're banged up. I said they're sore. They're lacking depth, and it's a significant issue for them. So they've lost their last 3 in a row after winning 13 in a row. I've loved the ride. I think they've completely exceeded expectations on the list that they've got and the deficiencies in their list. And I still think they can regroup and get it back together. But Lycett's banged up. Finlayson's form has been a significant drop-off. It's an issue for them. Dixon's body is an issue. And if Aliir or McKenzie go down, there's all sorts of problems. And their draw does not get any easier. They've clearly had a really difficult draw. So it's been Carlton, Collingwood, Adelaide, into Geelong, GWS, Freo in Perth, and Richmond to finish off the season. And top 2 is in danger. It's going to be difficult for them to win it.
Can he get signed tomorrow? It's August 1?
He will get signed. So they have a verbal commitment to extend his deal. And I think that would be a good thing to do, and to get that done pretty soon, just to ease a few nerves, to get some good sentiment around the club before a big last month leading into a significant finals series for them. But there's concerns for Port Adelaide, clearly, and that is back to their list and their lack of depth in that list. The Saints, gee whiz, they kicked 19 goals, Bucks. The Saints.
Yeah, and
where did that come from?
In 2 blocks. At the end of the first quarter, they just went bang, 4, 5, 6, 7 in a row, and then at the beginning of the last quarter. So the Saints is where I want to focus. So their ability to turn it on in those 2 blocks. They kicked 5 in the last quarter when Hawthorn had ground their way back in to within a couple of goals. And then 3-quarter time, coach was able to bring the players in, coached around a couple of specific elements clearly, and then they just went bang, 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 and then they put the game out of dispute. So what that says to me against St Kilda is, even though they've been bouncing along and just going, they only beat North by 8 points and West Coast by 8 points over the last sort of 5 or 6 weeks, in amongst a whole heap of disappointing losses. Even though they're just bouncing along, and even though it was Hawthorn, what I saw was enough belief in the coach and enough belief in the players that they have there to be able to go on little bursts and little runs. The question for them, bizarrely for a Ross Lyon coach side, is can they hold up enough defensively in between those runs? Because that was what they were doing really well, defending well, but then attacking. They still gave up 93 points. Only Saints fans, only the true believers would think that they're going to be able to hold on. But they're there. They're there, and they are a game in percentage.
You'd love to get them in the first final, though, wouldn't you?
There's a very real chance. There's a very real chance that St Kilda stay in.
Well,
and if they do, but then that's why it is a 23-game season.
I know.
That's what, and it's not just your last month that counts, but you like to be with a little bit of momentum, and they. Well, do they have it in that last quarter? Potentially they could. Melbourne just ran all over the Tigers in the last quarter.
Too good, too strong. They're the second seed. They're the biggest threat to Collingwood, who they have beaten this year. And look out, because top two is still a very likely possibility for Melbourne as they come storming home. What a performance it was. Forward line, Petty kicks 6, Van Rooyen kicks 4, Melksham kicks 4, Pickett kicks his 2, Petrarca more midfield time with 8 clearances yesterday, and inaccurate again, but so well balanced. They do have the defensive capabilities, we know that, and their stars came to play yesterday. What a last quarter it was against an opposition who was good. Terrific game of footy, a finals-like game yesterday at the MCG. West Coast snapped a 16-game losing streak to beat North by 5 points, Bucks.
Is it unprofessional or disrespectful to say that I didn't give this game much time?
No, I think you're well within your rights to give this game 0 time, because that's what both teams deserve.
I watched enough until West Coast had actually put the gap in the game, and it looked like the game was done. Now, North obviously came back late, and I missed that element of the contest. But these two sides they've found themselves in dire straits. You get to these games, and you want to win. As much as we think about the tanking and posturing and putting yourself in a position for a little bit better, one extra draft pick, in a couple of months' time. I've always felt that it's against my fight and my integrity to believe that anyone would ever choose to lose a game of football or not play at their best. I understand, even when there's
players don't do that.
No, players don't. But
this club North has set that up. As a club, they didn't want to win that game.
And has West Coast?
No, I think they're desperate for wins, and I think their issues are more significant than psychology.
My speaks volume out of this is it speaks volumes for the competition that we have less and less of these games than we used to. There are more. We very rarely find these games happening now, and they're isolated situations. They're isolated scenarios. The conversation around benefiting from a loss, I'm glad that it doesn't kick up and it's not something that is front and centre, because there's so many more positive things to focus on. Well done, West Coast. And both teams have got a month, and they've got young players in there that are just loving the opportunity to play AFL. So let's celebrate that.
Yep.